Welcome to Witch Hunt. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
And I'm Sarah Jack. Today we're discussing a topic that might surprise new listeners: the witch hunts, accusations of demonic possession, and other harmful practices in our modern world.
While our podcast often focuses on historical witch trials, today we're exploring how similar beliefs and practices are used to justify harming people in the present day.
We are honored to have with us Jordan Alexander, Chair of the United Kingdom's National Working Group on Spiritual and Ritual Abuse, which is also known as SARA.
How would you define spiritual and ritual abuse?
The National Working Group, we developed a definition, and to explain it easy, because it's quite a lengthy definition, it's easy to go a bit ad hoc and just explain it in more layman terms. And it comes in three parts. The first part is where the abuser or the offender has a belief. It could be spiritual, superstitious, traditional, any type of belief really, learned behavior. And it's something where they believe that because of this, what they behold within themselves and is embedded in them, and that they believe then that somebody else is either possessed, or they believe someone is a witch, or that they need help, and they use their beliefs, spiritual beliefs, to justify harming and abusing and sadly even murdering other people. We've had some stated cases in the UK like Victoria Columbier, the Boy in the River, Christy Bamu, Aisha Ali, and more recently in Scotland, a number of children who were abused this way as well. On the other strand, it's where the victim survivor has spiritual beliefs, and the abuser may not share those same beliefs, but knows how to manipulate, groom, or exploit the person to make them do whatever they want. And we see this a lot in trafficking. I've worked in modern slavery, human trafficking for a number of years, and the figures coming through of people saying, actually, this is how I was trafficked. This is how my trafficker controlled me. The trafficking itself may have been sexual exploitation or labor or debt bondage, but the actual controlling mechanism was their spiritual beliefs. And a good example of that is like Santeria. We're seeing a lot of women from Latin America and Cuba being trafficked into the UK for sexual exploitation. These women aren't being kept in houses or dwellings with bars on windows or locks on doors. They're just being kept there with their own beliefs, holding them there, and the abusers know how to manipulate that and make them controlled. And then we have the ritual itself. The ritual is often linked to the belief, spiritual belief itself. And as an example of that might be exorcism. It's a word that a lot of people are familiar with. It's not limited to exorcisms, deliverances, ruqya, many different forms of removing evil spirits and processes. But the ritual itself is often linked to the abuser's spiritual belief itself. I did say it's quite long. That's the layman term of the version as well. We are seeing more and more that it is being used as the mechanism to control, coerce people into so many of the more commonly known or more commonly understood forms of abuse, like domestic abuse, forced marriage, honor-based abuse, financial exploitation, violence against women and girls, GM, slavery and trafficking, like I said, and child abuse. And what we're seeing is predominantly where the abusers are using either their beliefs or the victim survivor's beliefs to manipulate, control them into doing something. We had a really famous case recently here in the UK, our second ever prosecution of FGM. And the title in the newspapers was "Woman Takes Child for FGM Over Fear of Being Cursed." And that whole element of being cursed seems to have been ignored. Now, there's no excuse for FGM. It's a horrendous thing that happens to women and girls. But we're not remembering that actually maybe there's a potential that this woman wouldn't have done that had she not been potentially controlled, coerced through her beliefs of this curse or whatever that might be. So that's where the element of control. And for some people like ourselves who haven't grown up in a society or community where spells, hexes, curses are very real and very part of that creates spiritual beliefs, we might just think that's just a load of nonsense. Well, that can't make you do anything, just ignore it. But we have to go back to what I said earlier, respecting other people's beliefs, and understanding them and learning about them and seeing how powerful they are. We all have beliefs, and we all have spiritual beliefs, just supernatural beliefs, traditional beliefs, and they're powerful. In fact, just to follow on with that one, actually, I spoke at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office a few months ago on forced marriage, something that I've never experienced, and I dare say I never will. And I went along to the Forced Marriage Annual General Conference, invited to speak about spiritual and ritual abuse. I have never been so nervous in my life. The entire audience was 99% women. And I thought, how can I, as a white British male, talk about something that I've never experienced and never will experience, and how can I get them to understand how spiritual and ritual abuse can be used in forced marriage? And I gave a presentation, and at the end of it, I had such positive feedback that I was actually drawn to tears in a little bit. And then the number of women who have approached me and emailed me privately afterwards, telling me their stories of how from the age of 2 or 3 here in the United Kingdom, they were accused of being a witch, or they were told that they were evil and possessed by evil spirits by their family. They were then subjected to years of child abuse, sometimes sexual abuse, by family members, because the justification that they were evil, that meant that they could be abused. At the age of 16, they were then put into a forced marriage as a way of getting them out of the family, a way of that family removing the evil from the household. They were then spent years at the hands of domestic and sexual abuse by their husbands, who had married them knowing that they were being labeled or accused of being a witch or an evil spirit of some sort. And then they escaped this marriage after years of abuse, and now they're fleeing honor-based abuse. So you can see there how spiritual and ritual abuse is almost at the center of everyone justifying why they think they have a good reason to commit child abuse, to commit domestic abuse, to commit forced marriage, which leads to honor-based abuse. And the same happens with every type of abuse. SARA tends to sit as the rationale or justification by the abuser at the heart of everything. If we're looking at obviously what's been done to address SARA in the United Kingdom, it's important to look at the history. So in the year 2000, we had the fatal case of Victoria Climbié, who was killed in the UK. And it was labelled as one of the biggest child abuse investigations of its time. It then became apparent that she had been accused of being a witch, or she'd been branded a witch. I don't like that term. It really gets my back out. Branded. It's awful. But it's a term that the papers used. And the papers then said, well, it's a one-off. This is rare. This would never happen again. This is the United Kingdom. We don't have witchcraft anymore. We got rid of all witchcraft and accusations of witchcraft back in 1735. We sometimes pat ourselves on the back a little bit too easily. And then 6 months later, Adam, or known as the boy in the river, was trafficked into the UK for a ritual sacrifice or multi-murder. And so it wasn't a rare case. And then we've seen more and more and more happen over the years. The National Working Group was created in 2011 by Parliament. And it was brought together to bring people together to help understand that this happens and does go on. It's a real shame, actually, because Parliament kind of bowed out of it very quickly. And I don't know if they thought, well, we've created a group, we've done what we need to do, end of. Because that's not it. Then more needs to be done. It's a great start, but it needed that continuance. The National Working Group has been going since 2011, like I said, and it has brought people together to help learn. But when I took over as chair last year, the feedback I got from members was, it's not significant. We're not doing anything. We're not making a difference out there. Individuals might be doing bits here and there, but we're not doing anything as a group. And I took that on board. And it's one of the reasons why we're now addressing by, first of all, developing a new national action plan, because the current one is dated 2012. So it's 14 years old already now. And some of the terminology in there is not really fit for purpose anymore. But more than that, the National Working Group has grown in just the last year from around 12 organisations that attended. We've now just hit just about 80. And it's phenomenal. I'm approaching different organisations, statutory organisations, charities, academics, and they all say, we see this all the time. Just the other day, I took a meeting with an animal rights organization and a lovely lady called Maya. And she said in her work, she's seeing animals being used for spiritual and ritual abuse as the perpetrators of sacrifices and abuse. So we've got another strand here. So we had a meeting with the Wildlife Commission, Border Force, Immigration, Customs, who are seeing animal parts being trafficked into the UK, often for these rituals and these processes that are taking place that are then leading to humans being harmed. So we have another strand there. We have the National Crime Agency involved. We have the National Police Chief Council. We've got NHS England, Royal College of Midwives, Border Force, Immigration. And all of these collection of agencies and so many more are saying, we see this. We didn't really know it was something that was going on. We didn't know a national working group existed. And now they do. You saw yourself last time you came to the meeting. It's an abundance now of collected minds and leadership roles all coming together to say, right, how can we get something out there and get the message clear? We have some barriers and we have some hurdles. There was a recent report from ICSA, so that was the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse here in the UK, and that was heard in Parliament. I went to that with a number of survivors who had experienced spiritual and ritual abuse. And I think we were a bit disappointed by the outcome of the report when it said, and I quote here, spiritual and ritual abuse isn't really something that exists. And if it did, it only can affect you emotionally or psychologically. And I was sat at the back of the room and I could see a lot of women, especially in the room, pursing their lips. I don't know if you've seen The Devil Wears Prada, when the Miranda, she's not happy, she purses her lips when she sees a dress that she doesn't like. That face was all around the room, all these women almost biting their tongues, not to scream and saying, hang on a minute, I was raped through spiritual abuse. Are you saying that didn't happen to me now? Other people who've told me they would be financially extorted, having to pay extortionate amounts for exorcisms or rituals. That's not abuse anymore. So what we want to do is turn that page and say, spiritual ritual abuse, accusations of witchcraft, it's real. We should be patting ourselves on the back and saying, yeah, we got rid of it in 1735 through law, because actually we didn't. We just found a way to maybe ignore it and not pay attention to it. So we're seeing massive changes in terms of what organizations are then doing individually. And we want to bring about an amendment into legislation. So the Serious Crime Act here in the UK covers what's called controlling coercive behaviour. However, it limits it to people in domestic settings. For example, if I give me and you, Sarah, if I was to control or coerce you, because we're not related, we're not intimately related in any way, shape or form, we're not in that domestic setting, there's no crime. I'm not culpable. Can't be found culpable of controlling or coercing you. So we want to expand that legislation to include 4 little words, to also include in a position of trust, 5 words even, so that people like spiritual leaders who are controlling people, coercing people, manipulating, grooming and exploiting people, and traffickers can be held accountable for using spiritual and ritual beliefs against. We also then want to go one step further than that. Then we would love to bring spiritual and ritual abuse into being recognised almost like a hate crime. So in the UK, we have racially aggravated assaults and homophobically aggravated. Anything to do with protected characteristics under the Equality Act could be a hate crime. And we'd like spiritual and ritual abuse to be recognised in that as well. So that if I was to manipulate, control, groom, exploit someone or harm someone, and spiritual and ritual abuse was the method or the controlling method, it would be an aggravating factor, which would add an automatic 2 years onto the person's sentence if found guilty. Going further than that, it's just really supposed to bring awareness and understanding. Myself and one of my colleagues, Rachel, were doing a presentation just the other day, and again, so many people when we spoke, saying, "Oh, this is a real thing. We report this all the time. We record this on our systems all the time, but nothing ever happens about it. No one takes it seriously."
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Witch Hunt.
Join us every week.
Have a great today and a beautiful tomorrow.